Ace Magashule once commanded absolute power in Free State. When he spoke, government officials, businessmen, and even judges obeyed. By 2023, he was expelled from the party he'd served for decades. This is the story of how the untouchable became the untouchable. Now, Ace Magashule was born in 1959 in Tumahole, a township near Paris in the Free State. Growing up under apartheid shaped everything that came after. In 1985, at age 26, he was detained for anti-apartheid activities. Then came exile in 1989. When he returned in 1991, South Africa was transforming, and Magashule positioned himself as a son of the struggle, someone who'd paid his dues fighting the old regime. But there's something interesting about his arrest record. Court documents show he was convicted of public violence, not the high treason charge that would later appear in some of his biographies. Now, this distinction matters because Magashule would spend decades trading on his struggle credentials. After 1994, when the ANC came to power, he was elected to the Free State Provincial Legislature. Then came executive council positions. By 1998, he'd secured the real prize, ANC Free State Provincial Chairperson. He would hold that position for nearly 2 decades. Now, during those years, Magashule built something remarkable in the Free State. Not just political power, but a system, a network where his word was law, where government departments, state enterprises, and private businesses all answered to one man. In May 2009, he was appointed Premier of the Free State, and that's when the machine really started running. As Premier from 2009 to 2018, Magashule's control over the Free State was described as absolute. Now we know this because of testimony given years later at the Zondo Commission. Mxolisi Dukwana, who served as Free State Human Settlements MEC from 2014 to 2015, provided the most damaging account. According to Dukwana's sworn testimony, Magashule personally directed how tenders were awarded. He allegedly oversaw irregular procurement. He even accompanied officials to meetings with businessmen linked to the Guptas. Now Dukwana described a province where normal procurement procedures simply didn't apply, where unsolicited bids were accepted, where competitive bidding was bypassed, where the Premier's office had final say on which companies got paid. The Free State Development Corporation became particularly important. Its chair, Hansi Matseke, was a Magashule ally. Matseke's company, Maono Construction, received hundreds of millions in provincial contracts. Critics said these were awarded without competitive bidding. Later, Matseke's company would subcontract to a firm owned by Magashule's daughter. The lines between state resources and family business had completely dissolved. Now, beyond construction, there was agriculture. The Vrede Dairy Project promised to empower local farmers. Between 2012 and 2016, 220 million rand was allocated. The money was supposed to create a thriving dairy business that would transform the rural economy. Instead, according to the Asset Forfeiture Unit, it became what they called a scheme designed to defraud the Department of Agriculture. Bank statements examined by the Zondo Commission showed the money ending up in Gupta accounts in India and the UAE. Meanwhile, Magashule's family prospered. His son Chepiso worked as an executive at a Gupta company from 2010, reportedly earning 90,000 rand per month. Not bad for someone whose father was supposedly just a public servant. December 2014 marked the beginning of Magashule's most audacious scheme. Now the setup was perfect. Tens of thousands of homes in the Free State had asbestos roofs, a genuine humanitarian crisis. These roofs were slowly poisoning families. The provincial government needed to act. Enter Edwin Sodi and Ignatius Mpambani. Sodi ran Blackhead Consulting. Mpambani owned Diamond Hill Trading 71. According to the Zondo Commission, Mpambani drove an unsolicited proposal to Magashule's office. Now here's where it gets interesting. Instead of opening the tender to competition, officials used something called piggybacking. They claimed they were extending an existing Gauteng contract. This allowed them to bypass all normal procurement procedures. The joint venture between Sodi and Mpambani was awarded 255 million rand. That's enough to remove asbestos from 36,000 homes. But according to forensic investigators, only about 21 million rand worth of preliminary work was ever done. By 2024, only 271 roofs had actually been addressed. Where did the rest of the money go? NPA forensic accountants traced 27 million rand in specific payouts. Now these weren't payments for asbestos removal. They were for other things entirely. There was 250,000 rand deposited to a travel agency for flights carrying 19 delegates to Cuba for a political course. There was 55,000 rand for school fees in the USA. The beneficiary? The daughter of a suspended judge who'd been dealing with the Guptas. There was 650,000 rand deposited to a dealership as down payment on a Maserati. The recipient was a senior department official. Another 600,000 rand went to Tim Mukesi, former head of the Free State Human Settlements Department, for what was called a property investment, and 2 million rand was spent on a brand new Mercedes. But these were the small transactions. The big money moved through subcontracting. The joint venture subcontracted to a company called Master Trader 232, owned by Sidney Radebe. Master Trader received around 44 million rand. They then subcontracted to ORI Group, which was supposed to get 21 million, but only received 6 million. ORI Group later took legal action. None of these companies actually removed any asbestos. Now investigators later discovered something remarkable on Edwin Sodi's computer. A spreadsheet with initials and amounts. One entry showed AM receiving 10 million rand. Prosecutors believe AM stood for Ace Magashule. Another entry, TM, thought to be Tim Mukesi, matched the property payment already traced. Sodi claimed he knew nothing about this spreadsheet, insisting Mpambani had created it in his office. Dead men, as they say, tell no tales. June 2017 changed everything. Ignatius Mpambani was driving his Bentley through Sandton traffic when he stopped at a red light. Two men wearing balaclavas approached, one from the front, one from the driver's side. Mpambani tried to accelerate, but traffic had him boxed in. The shooters opened fire, multiple shots. Mpambani was killed instantly. Now what police found in the car was interesting. Mpambani had apparently just visited an ATM. There was a plastic bag on the passenger seat stuffed with 100 rand notes, about 50,000 rand in cash. In the boot, another 50,000 rand was scattered among papers. He'd been driving around Sandton with nearly 1 million rand in cash. The murder remains unsolved, but Mpambani's death was just the beginning. In January 2018, Hawks raided Magashule's offices. They were investigating the Vrede Dairy scandal. Documents were seized. Then came the pressure on other witnesses. Morawadi Chalota had been Magashule's personal assistant. According to prosecutors, she was the one who facilitated payments in the asbestos scheme. Banking details would come to her. She would pass them to the bagmen. The money would flow. But as investigators closed in, Chalota fled. She went to the United States. Now her extradition became its own drama. South African prosecutors applied to bring her back. She fought it. In 2019, she was detained pending extradition. But then the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that her 2019 extradition had been unlawful. Prosecutors had to start again. Years of delay. Years for memories to fade and evidence to disappear. Meanwhile, the noose was tightening around Magashule. In November 2020, the NPA obtained an arrest warrant. 21 counts of corruption, fraud, and money laundering, all related to that asbestos tender. The charging document alleged Magashule had personally benefited through kickbacks, a Range Rover, a house, all paid for through his assistant Chalota. Now, to understand what happened next, you need to understand ANC politics. In December 2017, the party held its national elective conference. Jacob Zuma's faction, which included Magashule, went head-to-head with Cyril Ramaphosa's reformist camp. Ramaphosa won the presidency. But there was one surprise. Ace Magashule narrowly beat Senzo Mchunu to become ANC Secretary General, the Zuma faction's last man standing in the top leadership. Ramaphosa's camp was not happy. They immediately challenged the Free State voting results, the province that had delivered Magashule's victory. They claimed ghost delegates had inflated the numbers. But without proof, Magashule kept his position. Then came the masterstroke. In 2021, the ANC adopted what they called the step-aside rule. Any member charged with serious crimes had to vacate their position until their case was resolved. Now officially, this was about fighting corruption, cleaning up the party's image. But everyone understood what it really was, a weapon to remove Zuma allies from power. Magashule tried to fight back. When the party suspended him in May 2021, he wrote a letter attempting to suspend Ramaphosa in return. It didn't work. The ANC's National Disciplinary Committee found him guilty of misconduct. On June 12, 2023, the National Executive Committee expelled him from the party. Decades of membership gone. Now Magashule's response was predictable. He claimed political persecution, said the charges were a smear campaign by rivals. In August 2023, he launched a new party in Soweto, the African Congress for Transformation. He positioned himself as champion of what he called the unemployed and the fighters, but it was a far cry from the power he once wielded. April 16, 2025. Bloemfontein High Court. Ace Magashule stood in the dock alongside 17 co-accused. The charges, corruption, fraud, money laundering, all stemming from that 255 million rand asbestos tender. When asked to plead, Magashule was defiant, even made jokes. This case, Mokesi and others, or Magashule and others? He asked. He pleaded not guilty, claimed he was ready to fight. His defense would repeat the same theme: political motivation, a faction using the courts to settle scores. Now the state's case relies heavily on that paper trail. The bank records showing money flowing from the joint venture to luxury car dealers, the spreadsheet with those damning initials, the testimony of cooperating witnesses. But there are problems. Mpambani is dead, can't testify about what he knew or what orders he received. Chilota's testimony remains uncertain after her extradition saga. Other witnesses may be reluctant to speak against someone who commanded such power for so long. Edwin Sodi has been particularly interesting. He's blamed everything on Mpambani, claims the dead man masterminded the whole operation, says he didn't know about the spreadsheet found on his own computer. It's convenient, blaming someone who can't defend himself, but it also reveals something about how these cases unfold. When the walls close in, it's every man for himself. The trial faces years of delays, appeals on evidence admissibility, challenges to witness testimony, arguments about whether Zondo Commission evidence can be used in criminal proceedings. The South African legal system, already strained, struggles with cases this complex. Meanwhile, Magashule remains free on bail, still giving interviews, still claiming innocence, still painting himself as a victim of factional politics. Here's what haunts this story. As of 2024, 33,296 families in the Free State still live under asbestos roofs, still breathing in those deadly fibers every day. The government says it needs 3.13 billion rand to finish the job that 255 million was supposed to complete a decade ago. The cost of corruption compounds over time. Now OUTA, the organization undoing tax abuse, tracks these things. They report that only 0.8% of the promised asbestos work has been completed, less than 1%. While luxury cars were bought and overseas accounts were filled, the roofs stayed poisonous, the families stayed sick. This is the real crime, not just the stolen millions, but what those millions were supposed to do. Every delayed day of justice is another day those families spend under asbestos. Every legal maneuver, every postponement, every appeal has a human cost measured in damaged lungs and early deaths. There's something else to consider. Magashule was removed from power, yes. Expelled from the ANC, yes. But the system that created him? The network of patronage and corruption? Many of those people are still in positions, still awarding tenders, still moving money. The step-aside rule was supposed to change things, and maybe it has, partially. But critics note how unevenly it's applied. Some officials step aside immediately when charged. Others fight it for months. Some never step aside at all, despite serious allegations. The rule becomes another tool in factional battles rather than a consistent standard. Now, as this trial drags on, South Africa watches. Because Magashule's case isn't just about one man or one province or one tender, it's about whether the country can actually hold its powerful accountable, whether the courts can pierce through political rhetoric to find truth, whether justice delayed is still justice at all. The transformation of Ace Magashule from township activist to provincial emperor to criminal defendant tells a larger story, about how liberation movements become patronage machines, how those who fought for freedom can become the new oppressors, how the struggle credentials that once opened doors can become shields against accountability. You see, Magashule understood something fundamental about power in post-apartheid South Africa, that the language of transformation could mask extraction, that empowerment rhetoric could hide enrichment schemes, that as long as you spoke for the poor, you could rob them blind. The asbestos tender wasn't just corruption, It was corruption wrapped in the flag of service delivery, theft disguised as development. But perhaps things are changing. The very fact that Magashule sits in that defendant's dock suggests something has shifted, that the untouchables aren't so untouchable anymore, that even those who once commanded provinces can be called to account. Still, until those roofs are fixed, until those billions are recovered, until the last family is safe from asbestos, this story isn't over. The ledger remains unbalanced. Justice remains a question mark hanging over South Africa like those deadly fibers still hanging over the Free State. The question isn't whether Ace Magashule was corrupt. The evidence speaks for itself. The question is whether a system that created, enabled, and protected him for so long can truly judge him now, and whether that judgment, when it finally comes, will mean anything to the families still waiting for those roofs to be fixed.